Welcome, weary travelers. Let me tell you about the evil drow priestess who was found shitting on her throne. No, pants down encounters. That's what we're talking about today. Monday monster encounters, pants down. What the hell am I talking about? Well, okay. Uh, if you really want people to get feel that your setting and your world is a place that is real, that it feels organic, that it feels dynamic, have the world seem like it's moving with or without the PCs. And one way to do that, and also to have a lot of fun with them too, is to have the monsters and the encounters happen as if the player characters have interrupted something, that the monsters and your NPCs are actively doing things that they normally would do if the PCs hadn't even arrived. Does that mean going to the bathroom? Does that mean washing their face in a stream? Is it picking their teeth after a hearty meal? Is it organizing their extensive rock collection? Is it bullying the weakest and smallest member of the goblinoid horde or something like that? The answer is yes. Try doing things that are like in media res in the normal lifestyle of the NPCs and creatures that are in your world. So let's make up some examples, right? So you have yourself a tribe of orcs, right? You got to have some goblinoids, right? They're your average thing, and you need to spice them up a little bit because hordes of orcs or hobgoblins or goblins or kobolds or whatever, they can easily turn faceless and they become cannon fodder after a while. So you're like, well, how can I spice this up? Introduce when the player characters, especially if the player characters are like in the midst of an investigation, or they're waiting in the shadows, or they're watching from afar, or something like that, they can really acquire some information as to their behavior and stuff. Darius Jonas says extensive rock collection is the Meridian national hobby. Yeah. So the thing is that what are they doing before the player characters have even involved themselves in their lives? It's a little unrealistic to assume that having a dungeon crawl with all the creatures just literally looking at their watch, waiting for the player characters to arrive, for them to then all of a sudden activate is a little bit silly. So are they collecting firewood? Are they bored? Is the Lich King looking in the mirror trying to practice his maniacal laugh before the player characters arrive? Are they moving into a new home? Are they, like I said before, are they picking on the smallest member? Are they having arm wrestling contests? Or are they sharpening their weapons and talking to the armorer, or going through a horde that they captured from days ago and still going through the pieces because they want to know exactly what kind of treasures they have? Maybe there's a magic item they're trying to figure out how it works, and it's going off randomly and such, and they're having fun / panicking / proud of what they've acquired and trying to keep it away from everyone else. So all of these things, it could be they're feeding their mounts, or trying to capture food, or they're on their own. They've sent their own scouts out for a raiding party, and those scouts are talking amongst themselves about what they're going to steal and keep for themselves before they go back to the main army or what have you. So just having an organic, and I say air quotes, realistic, but I would say maybe not realistic, but actions that are indicative of the setting that you're in, that people or NPCs or monsters are engaged in before you encounter them, or even during or after you encounter them. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to stress yourself out trying to think of new and different ways. Just something simple. An ogre picking flowers in a field, some kind of goblinoid or something that's picking his nose and making drawings on a cave wall or something. And for your NPCs especially, they go into a city or a small village, or they see riders on a road or something. Maybe they're having a conversation about relatives they hope to meet and hope that things are still the same. Maybe one of them has a lost love and they can't wait to see them again. Maybe another one of them is sadistic, and he's just thinking about all the terrible things he's going to do when they raid this village. And the other one, Grimchild, what's going on? They're just having NPCs and creatures, if they're alive, allow them to live and breathe in your world. And this doesn't have to happen every single time, right? They all don't have to have their pants down taking a shit in the woods, but that's just indicative of what the beasts and the monsters and the NPCs in your world could be doing on their downtime. Are they burying eggs that they've just laid? Just woke up. Yeah. I'm not too smart doing a live stream at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, but I had to carve time out some kind of way. Having creatures that just woke up, they were asleep. It was a bear that was hibernating, or there was an encampment, and the bandit encampment is just waking up at like 5 o'clock in the morning when the sun starts to rise and is trying to evaporate the fog that's laid over the valley or something like that. If your player characters have been scouting out, maybe they find this bandit horde or something. And so those are things that that you can do to bring a little bit more life into your world. And especially if you want to make it specific to your setting, you could have them engaged in things specific to the cultures or politics and what have you in your setting. And this way you can, instead of giving them an info dump at the beginning of the game, instead you can give little bits and pieces of information to the player characters through the actions of your NPCs that they're watching. For example, maybe there's a bandit horde and there's a small statue, and a number of them have gathered around the statue, and they say some form of prayer. They throw off some kind of saying or something like that, like may the golden priestess protect us in our raids or something like that. And a couple of them like, I hear you. Yes, protect us or something. Maybe they throw a couple of coins down in front of the statue or rub its head, or they're, take some holy water and put it on their forehead or something, and they go out and start raiding. And then it's like, well, wait a minute. I thought who's this golden lady? Is that a goddess? And if maybe one of the player characters is worshiping this goddess, it's like, why would they pray to a goddess and then go out robbing people, right? And that could give a little bit of mystery as to how the gods operate in your world. Is this goddess a goddess of light and life? Why would bandits even think that they would be blessed unless this goddess isn't that way? Or maybe these bandits aren't really the kind of bandits you think they are. Maybe they're more like Robin Hoodish, and so they're robbing people, but maybe they're taking it back to the downtrodden and hiding in the woods because the local king puts on a good face but is really starving the children and women and such. So you can do all kinds of things to have your encounters organic, meeting people in the middle of what they're doing. Why wouldn't an NPC that's be caught in the middle of reading their spell book or drawing a map or writing notes? Why wouldn't an NPC, the NPCs go to see a guild master, and before they go see the guild master, someone is there before them ending a conversation and then leaves. So maybe the guild master's like opens a pouch and hands it to this individual and says, show these coins and tell them that you got them from the Dark Hands. Let them know that in 3 days' time, they are to leave the door open and a key with the young boy that sits by the door. Tell them that quickly now, leave. And the person leaves and then, and then waves their hands to the player characters. Come, let's talk. And it's like, well, what was that conversation about? I don't know. Sometimes you may have to have some thought about it. Other times, just come up with it on the fly. Have your pants down, with an idea like, okay, I'll have the head of the Thieves Guild send out orders to go after the Dragonborn contingent. That's it. That's what I'll just do. And then later on, you can then flesh out those ideas. So basically, you're dropping little hints, little bits of flavor, little story nuggets out there into your world, and then letting the player characters bump up against them. So if you want to, always with the hairs. So if you want to have your player characters learn more about your world, they could learn about that with little bits of conversation. One great way of doing this is the player characters come into a major town. The first place they may want to go is into the open market, right? They come into the city walls, they come inside, they maybe pay a fee or what have you, or talk to the gate master. Then there's a big bazaar where they have tents and food and kids running around and animals and fish laid out on ice or something. I don't know where they get the ice from, but it doesn't matter. So they've got fruits and veggies and chickens, and everyone's trying to sell scarves and trinkets and such. And as they walk through, they hear bits and pieces of conversation about kings and queens and legends and omens. Prue Prue says, have your pants down is a very apt description of my DM style. You don't necessarily have to have your own pants down, although, that's an interesting DM style. Before you roll the dice, pants got to come down. I don't know. That kind of leads itself to some form of unique kind of punishment for your gaming group, unless everyone prefers their pants down and they're being punished with their pants up, in which, I don't know, you might want to make a Twitch channel about that. Anyway, so having people come through the bazaar and learning little bits and pieces of information, TMI. Grimchild says TMI, Prue. So having dropping these little nuggets along the way, especially if you're like, man, I've created this big world. There's a big desert, and there's one place in the Arctic land, and there's other place, and then there's the mountains, and then there's the swamps. How do I get my players interested in my world? Okay, here's what I'll do. I'm just going to drop little bits and pieces like seasoning, and season it as the player characters move and go around the world in your setting, and then once at some point it's going to hook, right? Especially if you have a sandbox, you're throwing out these hooks and you're fishing, and you're like, throw another hook out. Oh, the player characters didn't catch on that hook. All right, throw another one out. Catch, boom, 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 pull it back. And so once they grab onto those hooks, then that's the time for you to flesh out those little bits and pieces, right? Also, there are ways to, how do I say this? There's a term known as special snowflake. That's where, and sometimes it's negative too, but a special snowflake is like a player character that wants to be so unique in the world that nothing else can compare to them. So it's like, I want to play a Dragonborn because no one else in the world, there are no other Dragonborn. Or I want to play a Druid because Druids really don't exist in this world, and I really want my game master or dungeon master to allow me to play a Druid because I want to be special and different. That's good, but it also means that, and conversely, the world has to be mundane. And that's not always necessarily the case. For example, for any of you who are fans of like Dark Sun or Eberron, those worlds are filled with very exotic things, creatures, encounters, and such. And your world can be too. Having the player characters understand that the rest of the world is arcane and unique, especially if you have a higher level magic, is a way to introduce them to say, hey, listen, you're not the only spellcaster, you're not the only rogue, you're not the only fighter, you're not the only paladin in this world. So yeah, Grimchild says my players with a sad face, right? It's the idea that, okay, for example, the players are in town, they're in the bazaar, and a horse-drawn wagon comes in, and on the back of the wagon is a dead, hacked up carcass of a dead, I don't know, devil dog or something. And the hunters are there. Some of them are hurt and harried, and they're like, it took us 3 weeks to hunt this devil dog down, but we have finally killed it. And people come in and people are clapping and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, the player characters might be thinking like, shouldn't we have been the one to hunt that thing down? But regular people do regular things. Maybe the devil dog was hurting people in the background, and so they went and killed this thing. And now the player characters are given information, right? There are other people that are just as skilled as them, maybe not as skilled, maybe take a little longer, but they're determined to kill these devil dogs out there. Or maybe there's only one. Is there another one out there? What was this devil dog doing? Where did it come from? Was it a cursed animal that ate something and turned this way? Is it the pet of something deeper and darker and more dangerous that is upset? Maybe there's a pack of these things out there in the wild, et cetera, et cetera. It may not lead to anything. Maybe it was just it was just roaming around and eating livestock, and these people killed it, which goes to show you that maybe these people are they are not beholden to adventurers to solve their problems. Maybe they are able to solve their problems on their own. Maybe they live and learn very quickly. And so if the players are like murder hobos and they think they're going to take advantage of this village, maybe they're far more skilled than people give them credit for. They're not 3 hit point 0 level individuals. Maybe they're made up of first and second and third level creatures. Grimchild says maybe the devil dogs are cursed children. Exactly. But here's the thing. You left that little nugget because it's in media res. It's in the middle of their actions. It's the middle of their life and such. So if the player characters so let's deep dive with that, right? The player characters don't grab onto that hook at all. Maybe days later, they see families out in the wild, and they've collected together around a priestess or something, and they're crying, and they're like, "Our children are missing." And someone else, says, "Well, you know as well as I do why the children are missing. We have not paid tribute to, I don't know, the evil big bad on the hill or something like that. And our children have come back to haunt us because we have forgotten our pact with that entity up on the hill." And other people were like, "Yeah, but they're evil. We aren't beholden to them at all. We've sent, great warriors to go slay them." And somebody else is like, laughing like, it's been weeks. Why aren't they dead? Why isn't the curse lifted or something? And you could have them just have these little arguments. And then when the player characters come in, everyone's like, shh, www.sh.com. And the players are like, well, why isn't anybody talking about it around us? And so that could be another hook, right? Like you give out this little information, player characters are around, then all of a sudden everybody shuts up and doesn't want to say anything. That's a great way to bring player characters in, because they're like, there's no way somebody's keeping information from us, right? We really want to be involved in it. So now we have this situation where you've placed inside the world something arcane like devil dogs or displacer beasts and that kind of thing, right? You have these community of people that have to deal with this situation, and they are they're not capitulating to their downfall, right? They're not going, "Oh, we need player characters and adventurers to solve our problems. Boo-hoo." No, they're trying to solve these problems, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're solving it well. It doesn't mean that they are actually solving the problem in general. They could be making it worse, but having the world exist and grow without the player characters it feels organic. If the player characters leave that village and come back, maybe things are different. Maybe they come back and part of the village is burned out and the people have their eyes are they have bags under their eyes from staying awake for days on end. They're gaunt because they haven't eaten in a while. They don't trust each other. When the player characters come into town, their first instinct is to pull away from them. Maybe they're ghostly because they've had to the people who used to be very loving and organized and collective now are at each other's throats. They don't know what to do. They can't move away from their community. The local magistrate really doesn't even allow them to come back into the major city. Grimchild says they've been paving the road, that road to hell. Exactly. It could have been their hubris. Maybe maybe this community made a warlock styled pack with a greater being, and this greater being is now extracting it from these people. And like I said before about the special snowflake thing, just because the player characters have class features and mechanical bits and pieces, inserting those mechanical bits and pieces into your world, if it's appropriate, makes a lot of sense. If there's a player character as a bard, there are people who are bards that tell stories, that tell tales and give out information. There instead of one individual, there could be a whole community that made a warlock style pact with an evil entity, and maybe now's the time for the player characters to go kill this evil entity. And then maybe along their way, they find out what kind of pact these people made with this evil entity. Maybe the community was protected by this evil entity as long as they gave up their firstborn or made sacrifices or kept the secret hidden of a deep subterranean chamber that had an altar where blood sacrifices were made. And the people, 200 years ago, someone made the pact, but now these people are living with that. And they're like, we're not benefiting from this. Why should we give tribute to some strange being on, this person could have fallen into legend if they've lived long enough. 200 years is plenty of time for reality to fall into legend and myth, especially if, of course, the people haven't traveled from their village very far. But you can do this with anything, as far as NPCs and creatures and such, even animals in your world. Bestial animals have a life outside of player characters. They don't just sit. They are not designed to be random encounters sitting in your world, twiddling their thumbs until you roll, a 1 on a D6 for them to be encountered on the 5th day of travel, right? It's possible for a wild dire bear to be to have like rabies and be infected with something that makes it mindless, or is trying to hunt down deer and kill it so that it can bring it back to its cubs, or going to its den and finding out that that wolves have gone into the bear's den, and the bear's trying to chase the scrawny wolves out of its den because that's where it lives. Or the bear is trying to scoop fish out of a nearby stream or river, and the player characters want to fill their water skins, and they see the bear across the way, and they're kind of like, eyeing each other. Or there are 3 other hunters that are tribal elves that live in the trees, and they're hunting they're hunting their latest meal, and they're running from or chasing down or just stuck in their tracks as this dire bear sees them across the way. And then the player characters come along. You have this triangle because the elves don't trust strangers, but they don't want to get killed by the bear. The bear sees the elves and knows they live in the woods and is like, hey, I'm hunting on this ground, and then sees the player characters and smells something odd. And then, well, what happens? Do the elves help the player characters if they're attacked by the bear? Do the player characters help the elves if the bear attacks the elves? If the bear leaves, do the player characters then try to talk to the elves, or do the elves run? I don't know. I mean, it depends on their actions, right? If the player characters were never involved, what would have happened? Do the player characters come upon one of these woodland elves that was attacked and is stumbling through the woods with bite marks and claw marks all over him and trying to stumble back to his tribe, and et cetera, et cetera. Something, organic things that have happened in the middle. The player characters come in the middle of a situation and they may not know what the hell's going on, but it's a great way, a mystery for them to unsolve and pull apart. And even you as the game master may not understand what that is. Grimchild says maybe that same pact patron turns out somehow to connect to the PCs, some loose end that the party had ignored earlier, like consequences. Absolutely. And just because, absolutely, let's take a deep dive down that path as well, right? Warlock patrons, cleric, the gods that the clerics and paladins may worship, druidic cults and elementals. They are not unique to the player characters. If they exist in your world, there are other people who may go to them for help. So a cleric may come across another group of worshipers that worship the same being, but maybe in a different way. A warlock patron may have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who have made pact to this other being, and maybe the person who's playing the warlock has come into this new world, sailed across the oceans, got to this new world, and is just like, whoa, like my patron has like their own nation over here. Like, whoa, I thought I was the only one. No, they, maybe the tiefling that with the demonic patron is like, no, they're building an army across the ocean. I never knew that. Or, I've never been forced or asked to perform these strange actions. Or this person has just made a new pact with my patron, and they are going through the same horrors that I did many years ago / 5 levels ago, right? And so they're meeting these people that are being told to go on these weird missions that are like bizarre, and being told to given these instructions, and the player character might be thinking, I remember when I had to do these strange things, go up to the mountain and walk naked in a circle 3 times and scream at the top of my lungs, in this language that I've never heard of, or something like that, and then wait 3 days for a coming storm, and like, what? And then after they've done that many games ago, all of a sudden they find someone who is up on a hill, walking in a circle 3 times, naked, screaming at the top of their lungs, et cetera, et cetera. So pulling one thing that Grimchild has kind of brought up is like making it personal, crafting the story that pulls and tugs at the little strings of your player characters, their backgrounds, the things they're interested in, their fears, their desires, their quest for power, or prestige. And you can pull at those strings by having other people involved in the world, doing things in the middle of their lives, and those things that they're doing in the middle of their lives impact the player characters, because they're like, wait a minute, that sounds like something in my player character's background. So for example, Grimchild says, a patron to the tiefling, no, baby, you're just you're just my eyes, right? You could be like, no, you're special to me. Those other thousands of people, they're nothing. You're my special. You're my favorite, right? Or you're my eyes, but they are my ears, and these others are my mouth, and they are my hand. And how? Okay, you could almost make a player character jealous of not quite having the devoted attention from their patron. And then it comes to show that maybe the player character is like, wait a minute, I hated my patron before, but now I kind of feel kind of off put. Like, why am I not the only one? And might try to do things to impress their patron, to say, you don't need them. Give me the power and I'll do what you tell me to do. I don't need you don't need those other people trying to make this community or whatever. Or it could be that this patron is assembling an army, and now is torn because maybe the society they came from, they know if they don't do anything, they will be invaded and slaughtered and taken over. And their warlock patron, which felt pretty good to them personally, isn't necessarily the best choice to have them, dominate the world, right? So sure, having a warlock patron that is a fiend for yourself may feel sweet. Having a warlock patron over an entire nation might not be very good. So, and you can do this with any number of people. Your person who's Poo says, you left me. You see why I had to take this gifted child? You made me do it. Exactly, right? Player characters don't want to do what they're told. With the Fae, with pack fiends, with those kind of things, player characters that are like, I'm not going to do what my warlock patron says. And you as a game master, you're like, sure, okay. All right, doesn't do anything. And the player character might be thinking like, I didn't suffer any consequences. That's kind of odd, but okay. I guess my patron doesn't want me to do anything. And then they find out that, yeah, your patron kind of left you in the dust, and like they're looking at the new and shiny, and they've got other plans. It could be that the patron has picked the big bad, right? The lizard people in the woods that are worshiping this evil fiend. And amongst the lizard folk, they're riding on giant lizards and riding on wyverns or something. And the player character may have had a dragon as their patron, but now there's this whole community that hey, you're human, but these lizard folk are kind of closer to the patron. Maybe they mutate into dragonborn. And so this is their way of gaining power, gaining prestige, and growing in influence. And the human being who has the same patron might feel a little bit put out, like, I don't quite feel like I fit in as much as these lizard folk with my dragon patron. Poo says, I love that, especially hitting players' family, friends, or the big bad, right? And imagine they come to a city, and let's say one of the player characters is like a fighter or a paladin or a barbarian or something, and there's a mistaken identity. So the mistaken identity is like the players are mistaken because maybe their brother or a sister or an uncle is the one that is taken over this town. Poo says that would be a delightfully toxic patron. Exactly. Who is to say your patron, if you're like a warlock or you're worshiping a god, or you're a druid and there's powerful elemental spirits, who's to say that they have their own motivations, right? You're a small cog in a big machine. They've got things to do. Your trouble, fine. I've got other plans. Immortal beings are very brilliant. They have their hands in a lot of pies. They've got tendrils out there everywhere, and they are constantly moving pieces on the game board. You're just a small cog. And now this will go to show them that, whoa, like my patron who I'm supporting might not be the best for this world, or vice versa. Maybe their patron would be an excellent overlord for the world. They're trying to fight for it, and they're finding out that their patron is trying desperately to recruit people, and it's not working. Poo says many gods also delight in and thrive on strife. It's the classic Olympian gods hanging together around the game board, but the game board is the world, and they're just moving little bits and pieces. Human beings involved in these eternal conflicts amongst the gods, and the one cleric that is worship the god of light and life might find out that god of light and life is very devious to get their way, and maybe trying to be devious or make pacts with dark powers to prove to the world that, hey, I'm needed as the god of light and life and justice. Prue says playing warlocks and families against each other would be lovely. Absolutely. For the most part, people that play warlocks want to hide their warlock powers and their patron from others. But imagine they go to a world, or their families find out that they've made these pacts and decide amongst themselves to join that same warlock patron, or maybe that warlock patron is slowly and surely picking apart that person's family, giving them what they want. So each person in the family has a secret, but that secret is the same amongst all of them. They all have slowly made a pact with this warlock patron in this person's family, but they're all trying to hide it from each other. And the player character is finding this out and is trying to get them to reveal this secret amongst each other. But maybe the warlock patron is like, you are not to reveal this to anyone, or I will, harm you, strike you, pull my powers from you. It could also be amongst clerics and paladins and otherworldly beings. Maybe they are being recruited from other great powers. And so I've talked about this before. When someone breaks an oath, I wouldn't take away their powers, but maybe giving them a different power from a different source that's trying to pull at them and pull them to another side would be great. Prue says, Odin is notorious for pushing his own followers to fight each other too. It's a great deal for him, the death of great warriors. Absolutely. What great way for the gods to have their own members fight each other to allow the greatest amongst them to rise to the top. Or you could have a sadistic being that has worshipers and pushes them to fight against each other so that none of them rise to a level that this godling could be threatened, right? And so the god of light and life may be holding a position and might feel threatened by another god of the sun and or something like that, another god of justice, where they're these gods of good and light, but amongst themselves they kind of don't agree with each other. So, and it doesn't have to be physical violence, right? In the midst of their clashing, they're revealing like blackmail and bribery and embarrassing rumors and things of that nature given out to the public. And so when as I mentioned in this, like pants down, in the midst of the player characters involving themselves with the NPCs, maybe one of their order is brought before the town square, and you find out that this great just knight is being accused of various crimes, and something embarrassing is being told to the whole city, and people are laughing at them and throwing rotted fruit because for some reason villagers and city folk like to hold on to rotten fruit, carry it around with them. I'm not sure, but anyway, so they're throwing rotten fruit at this knight, and they've stripped the knight of all of their accoutrements, taking their armor and their sword and taking it away from them and cast them out. And then what do the player characters do? Does one of the player characters go up to them and find out why? Do they feel the same way after this great secret is revealed? Maybe they feel like they need to punish the knight or find out why this renowned knight kept this secret for so long. Or maybe it's not true at all, and the knight feels like they shouldn't say anything because if they do say something, it might lead to some either greater harm or whatever. Prue says so many fine reasons for gods and greater beings to mess with social stuff in the earthly plane. Remember, the gods are, well, the best way to describe them is they are in the embodiment of the pure domain that they represent. And earthly reasoning doesn't matter to the gods. So, for example, a god of light and life, earthly politics doesn't matter to them. So it could be that the player characters want to fight this goblinoid horde only to find out that the god of light and life wants to keep them alive. Why? Because they are living beings. The fact that they are brutal and killing other folk may not be its concern, because maybe this god feels like you should have been doing more to stop the killing. My domain is to try to keep people alive and spread the word of light and life. You haven't been doing your end of the bargain. I've been doing mine, and they are worshiping me as well. So I'm going to try to keep them alive because they're devoted to me. You should have been doing more. And this could go to the, a thing of a player character cleric has been out adventuring, but it's like, maybe I should have stayed home and proselytized to, preach to the greater people instead of going out there and trying to gain my own personal glory. Maybe I should have been back here helping them grow and such, because maybe the god of light and life is moving more towards these goblinoid hordes as, devoted worshipers, and our fine folk are just now cannon fodder. It would be very interesting for the PCs to gather together to fight an enemy, only to find out that same enemy has the same patrons or gods or greater beings supporting them as the player characters. And it's like, whoa, we're about to meet on the battlefield. We're literally worshiping and devoted to the same being. Why are we fighting? And trying to convince people that, like, maybe we shouldn't fight, or maybe we should fight to garner the respect and admiration and devotion of this greater being for ourselves only, instead of this greater being supporting the outer realm or something like that, these outworld outsiders that might come into our world. And so this could be a test of sorts, like Odin blessing various Viking tribes to have them clash against each other to see which one of them will go to Valhalla or be blessed upon the earthly plane. So yes, it is possible that a patron could both support the player characters in what they want to do and the enemy itself, and then forcing them to confront each other. But so I just wanted to come up with some ideas, just talk in general to you guys about, like, having things happen in the world, whether they're really mundane, whether people are baking pies, or the ogres are fighting over the deer that they've captured and they're just cooking it over a spit, or whether the hobgoblins are talking amongst themselves and they're having wrestling competitions in the middle, or they're training their younger members in sword fighting before they travel through the woods. Just little things that give them a little bit of life, that they are doing things other than just waiting for the player characters to arrive, that they have a life, they have desires, they have a goal. Prue says power struggles among gods and their domain can be fun. PCs and patrons might get traded unknowingly. Absolutely, they can be traded back and forth, and the player characters don't know it, especially if you do it a little bit at a time. So a cleric of light and life one day wakes up and you as the game master says, oh, by the way, one of your spell choices is the spell of darkness. And you're like, wait, what? Yeah, one of your spells is darkness. You have to have darkness. You can pick the rest of them, but one of them is darkness. And then maybe a couple days later, it's like, okay, one of your spells is darkness. Another one is chill touch, or like something necrotic or whatever, right? And the player character might be thinking like, well, did I do something wrong? No, you didn't do anything wrong. But those are two of your spells that are in your domain type now. Other than, you have to remove light and cure wounds, but you have darkness and chill touch now. And slowly moving, and then having the PC like, wait a minute, those are cool powers, but do I want them? Is something happening to me? Prue says harvesting and foraging are great for making NPCs alive, I find, or entering a city and hear a specific pair haggle or get pickpocketed. Absolutely. And like I said, these are little nuggets. This is little spices that you're dropping into the world. And if the players grab onto it, then you can develop more story behind it. Otherwise, this is just things in the background. If the player characters if they see someone getting pickpocketed, this is a foreshadow into what kind of city they're in. Oh, we need to watch out for the orphan kids because they're pickpocketing people. Or you hear people haggling over a price and go, oh, in this town, yeah, the prices aren't pretty good. You got to haggle them down because they're going to charge you an arm and a leg. Or NPCs are scrounging for food, maybe getting beetles out of a tree or pulling a rooted of vegetables out of the ground, or trying to hunt for game and rabbits and stuff. And they've got laid little traps out, and they're getting the traps and finding the rabbits and, you know, taking them back to camp or something like that. And this just brings them alive. That makes them real beings, that they're not just hanging around going, you know, yelling out in the wild and being bestial and just going, ah, whenever the PCs come around. What do they do when the PCs aren't around? Do they play cards or roll dice? Do they talk about the times that they miss? Are they brutal to each other? When human beings aren't around, goblins are, you know, if they're chaotic and or evil, they can be pretty brutal to each other and pretty nasty. And so maybe they pick on the smallest member, or maybe the biggest member, you know, picks random ones in the crowd and has to beat them to keep them in line. And this might be a key to breaking apart the army, that they're not as organized as you think they are. You know, hobgoblins might be lawful evil, if I remember correctly, and they might be lawful evil, but maybe that's kind of indicative of their evilness, that you kind of have to lay the hammer down. And the PCs, you know, see the chieftain and their lieutenants have to lay the hammer down on their own troops, and this could be a way to break them up. Grimchild says, bring the world alive. NPCs are people, not XP gift boxes, right? Yeah, it's like, you know, oh, where's my experience points? Why is it talking back to me? Why is it having a life outside of my my imagination, right? Give them a real life, have them breathe and do things. You know, who is to say that an ogre doesn't want to pick flowers because it wants to it's attracted to the two-headed Etten on the hillside, and wants to desire to find the female Etten, and because he loves it so much or whatever, and wants to marry it or something. And it doesn't mean they're not evil, right? But it gives them a little personality, and it's going, oh, isn't that cute? The ogre wants to give flowers to the two-headed giant. And then it's like, well, hold on, wait a minute. That's like 2.5 times the evil. If they get together and have little two-headed ogre babies, that might be bad, right? Love. I made a video about it before, where love could be a great motivation, right? Maybe a Medusa is in love with one of the PCs and is sending little messages and such, and the Medusa is sending, you know, its evil minions out to try to separate the one PC from his party, and really wants this person to come over to his or her side. And is like, and it you know, you could have various methods of where the motivations of the monsters and the PCs do not fall into the typical, I want power, I want money, I want territory, right? It doesn't have to be murder. It could be love or devotion, or I want that PC to be my lieutenant. I want that warlock to join me, so we can be a coven of wizards and summon a greater being from another world. It could be a desire for them to, I want the PCs to rule part of the monster lands in my stead, because I'm going to ascend to a greater power or something like that. Yeah, the Lich King doesn't necessarily need to kill the player characters. Maybe they're like, I want to recruit them. So We're coming up on, we're about 10 minutes away from the hour. As usual, I like to deep dive, go on, talk about things in a rambly kind of way, but really it's just an let's just get together and create tons of ideas. In many ways, it's like a daily Monday through Friday ideas I can steal kind of thing. So for those who are new to what I'm doing, yeah, they're not short videos. They're not 5 to 10 minutes. Mainly because I love getting, I love interacting with other people because it allows my brain to wake up. And it also is, this is my coffee in the morning. Grimchild says, oh my God, 20 years ago, my players killed a pair of Medusas and a Madar and then found a baby Medusa. The party had to decide what to do. Exactly. Allow the consequences of their actions to exist in the world for good or bad, you know, and not predicting the outcome of those consequences, right? Grimchild says the dwarf cleric took the child. So now that puts that cleric, the dwarven cleric, in a position of what? Raising the child, but the child is a Medusa, and they are, the community knows we kill Medusas. That's it. They're evil. Doesn't matter. We kill it. But if it's raised in a good way, could the Medusa grow to become this greater power and such? Grimchild says they raised it and retired from adventuring. What a great way to end a story and then to bring it back maybe many years later. Poo Poo says maybe she's just stalking a little, but then a greater being finds out that she has tabs on the group that is an annoyance to him, and now he has her enslaved, delivering that info against her will. Yep, see, story ideas that you can bring back into the world, bring back into the setting, and have these things continue moving and growing outside what the player characters are thinking. That oh, well, that was an adventure from 3 sessions ago, whatever, it's done. Like, no it isn't. No it isn't, right? So anyway, guys, you guys have a great day. It's time for me and my commercial. Let's see if I can get into the cameras here. Critical Hit Publishing. I'm a contributing writer. I do the cinematic environs. You can find that on DriveThruRPG. Those links are below. We have a new release now. Pay what you want. Technically it's free, but if you go to DriveThruRPG, we have a new release called Adventure Keys. They are 3 to 4 pages long. They are like encounters that have a number of options to them. So we have threats and trappings and hooks and all the things you need to create an adventure and use it over and over again. You guys have a great one, everybody. Poo Poo, Grimchild, everybody that joins in, thank you very much for joining me. It warms my heart. So everyone have a very good day. I've got to head off to work. You guys have a great one. I will see you guys later.